Dylan Oliver, and I'm doing the presentation on the fact of wearing a backpack while shod or barefoot. Shod is another term for footwear. So students often wear backpacks. This is one of the reasons why this is important. There was students often wear backpacks. There was a study at Alabama that showed that 2/3 of all students, 2/3 of the students always wear backpacks while they're at school. And then college students walk an average of 9 miles a week. And then while they're at school, while they're wearing a backpack, most of that 9 miles is while they're wearing a backpack. And then the effects of load carry. So wearing a backpack can increase your peak vertical ground reaction force. The peak vertical ground reaction force is when you're walking, when you're walking, you put force onto the ground. When you push onto the ground, the peak vertical ground reaction force is the most amount of force that is being applied at that time. And then the loading rate can also increase. Loading rate is the amount of time it takes to get to that peak vertical ground reaction force. Next is while wearing a backpack, injuries are step length will also decrease because there is a added load. That means there's an added weight, and that means discomfort on your foot. And so and step frequency will also decrease. It will also increase. Because step frequency increases because you try to make your pace. You try to compensate for your pace. Okay, so here's the injury part. While wearing a backpack, injuries are often occur. They're such as musculoskeletal injuries and lower back pain. I don't like this mouse. Okay, so barefoot, so it is common for runners to actually, it has been more common for runners to start using minimalist type shoes. Those are such as Vibram Five Fingers, where you have toes in your shoes. But Vibram Five Fingers mimic barefoot style walking. So that it's become more common. And then walking barefoot compared to shod also promotes spatial temporal and kinetic difference. Spatial temporal differences are differences in time and distance, and kinetic differences are the way that you move or forces that are on the ground. And then there have not been any studies done that combine the effects of barefoot and backpacks while walking. And then the purpose of the study is to investigate the spatial temporal and kinetic differences while barefoot and shod walking because injuries are increased while wearing a backpack. There isn't any known information of if they increase while barefoot while wearing a backpack or if it's just while shod. So because there was other studies, and then the loading rate also increased while they were barefoot, and so while adding a backpack, I hypothesized that the loading rate will increase even more, and the peak vertical ground reaction force will increase more. The step length will also decrease because there is more discomfort because you have no padding, you have no shoe on. And there's a backpack that adds even more discomfort. So for the methods and material, is there a laser pointer? Yeah. Okay. So for the participants that walk up, there's like in the other biomechanics presentation, there's a 10-meter walkway, and in the center of that walkway there's 2 force plates. You have to step on each of those force plates. And then there are 4 different conditions that that each participant has to walk through, and those, and then the backpack that they wear is 15% of their body weight. And then the total mass is in kilograms, which, and then the total mass is the weight of the shoe, the backpack, and the participant. And then the total weight is converted to newtons to average out the weight between the people. And then here are the 4 different conditions. BU is barefoot unloaded. BL is barefoot loaded. SL is shod loaded, and then SU is shod unloaded. Later on in the graphs, you will see those terms in there, and that's what those mean. Here, in the earlier presentation, here's another. Those are the timing system. This is how we keep the velocity at the same rate. Otherwise, it is. There will be more variables and it will be less accurate. And then so here's the force plates, and then here's the 10-meter walkway. As you walk by the timing system will beep and it will start recording data. Yes. Okay. So there are different variables. The first variable, like I said before, is peak vertical ground reaction force. That is when the most force is being applied when you step onto the ground. And then there's the loading rate. The loading rate is the rate at which you reach the peak vertical ground reaction force. This is the peak braking and peak propulsive ground reaction forces. The peak braking is when you step on the ground with your heel. When you step with. When your foot hits the ground, you step with your heel. The heel is applying force in the opposite direction of your body. And that is the peak braking. And the peak braking is the most amount of force at that time. The peak propulsive ground reaction force is when you step off with the ball of your feet, and that is applying force in the direction that you are going. The peak propulsive is the most amount of force that is being applied in that phase. And then the step length and step time. Step length is the amount of the distance you take from your step, and the step time is the amount of time it takes to reach that step. The step time and step lengths are fixed. Will be very much similar because there is a fixed velocity. And then here are examples of how to find the. So up here is where you would see the peak braking ground reaction force, and then up here is where you would see the peak propulsive ground reaction force. Right here is the peak vertical ground reaction force. To get these graphs, there is data that is put into Excel from the force plates. So I went through those Excel plates and found when they first started making contact with the ground with one foot, and then when they left the ground is when that ends. This is on the x-axis. So this is on the y-axis, and this is on the x-axis, being a three-dimensional graph. To find the step time, you would subtract the first initial contact minus the second initial contact divided by and then loading rate is when you minus the subtract the force of subtract the force of a pressure that is being applied to the ground when you first make contact, which is virtually zero, from the force of the peak vertical ground reaction force, and then divide that by the time of initial contact, which and then subtract that at the time of the when the peak vertical ground reaction force occurs, and then the results. Okay, so there were three subjects that we had, one female and two males. The average, so we added their weights up and then made an average. There was not enough. There was not enough candidates for a statistical analysis. 5 minutes. Okay. And then right here is figures peak vertical ground reaction force. These, okay, right here, something strange occurred. Right in here, there is the opposite effect of when wearing a backpack. While barefoot has the opposite effect of wearing a backpack while shod. So your peak vertical ground reaction force actually decreases while barefoot and increases while shod. And then here is what it's easier to see that with this graph right here, the interaction plot. And then here's the loading rate. The loading rate shows that while you were while barefoot, your loading rate is a little bit higher than while barefoot unloaded is a little bit higher than it is while shod unloaded. And then here's the peak braking and peak propulsive ground reaction force. Right here, there is little difference from while wearing a backpack, your braking force is higher. While wearing a backpack, your braking force is lower than your propulsive force is lower than while you are unloaded. So step length also increases from shod to barefoot, while it stays the same from barefoot to shod, from barefoot unloaded to barefoot loaded. It decreases from shod unloaded to shod loaded. And like I said earlier, since we're at a fixed velocity, these stay the same because there is no like varying steps. So those two step length and step time will stay the same. And then here the sketch. Okay, so the barefoot unloaded was higher than shod unloaded because which contradicts the work of Keenan and Zhang. So that was very unexpected in what we saw. And then the decrease from barefoot to shod unloaded may have been caused by the cushion of the shoe, that because there is discomfort while stepping barefoot unloaded. So and while you are shod unloaded, you will have more cushion, so you will step more freely with applying pressure. The decrease from barefoot to barefoot unloaded to shod unloaded, to barefoot loaded, may have been caused by the lack of cushioning, making more discomfort and And then while shod having an increased peak vertical ground reaction force. That's because of the cushioning effect. The larger loading rate with the barefoot agrees with the previous work of Zhang. He found that the larger loading rate, again, the discomfort of walking while without padding. And then spatial temporal differences, change step lengths were observed in another work which agreed with our study. And then while barefoot, the changes may have been due to the discomfort of walking with the shoe. And then, so the loading rate did not change as much as the peak vertical ground reaction force. From this, we came to a conclusion that maybe that while barefoot, it is more, the force that is applied may be more important than the rate at which that force is developed. And because we only had 3 candidates, we were not able to do a statistical analysis. For a larger pool would be required for a statistical analysis, and that would mean more accurate results. And then here are my references, and then I would like to thank Kevin Dames, my mentor. It's been a lot of help and a lot of fun. And then Sean Hoskin, my advisor. I like that guy. And then Benjamin Dancer. These 3 are my teachers at my school who supported me going to FSI. My grandpa Kenny, who helped me with money for FSI, and then FSI staff. I would like to thank all of them. And then I'd like to thank the University of Northern Colorado, and then MAST And then I'd like to thank XL Energy for sponsoring me, and for Gary from from XL Energy for coming here. And that is my